2023 meeting of the Springville Planning Commission. The first item to take care of would be the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion.
I'll second it.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda is adopted. There are minutes from the July 25th, 2023 meeting included in our packets. They took up many pages. Are there any corrections or adjustments to the minutes that have not already been submitted? And if not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
A second.
2 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We have 2 items on our consent agenda. They are administrative actions where no additional discussion is needed. When approved, the recommendations in the staff report become the action of the commission. Do we have any objections or comments on the consent agenda items or not? If not, then the consent agenda will stand as approved.
I'd kind of like to know a little more about the approval for the various streets. What have we done? Has it changed since we approved that last time, or?
Would you like to address that? To an administrative item? Sure, yeah, so if you'd like, you can make a motion to move that. Don't have to make a motion, okay. We'll just move that to, that would be item number 1 on the consent agenda. We'll remove that to the administrative session, and with no objections or comments on item 2, we'll accept that as passed. Seeing no objections or comments, we'll consider that a passed motion. So then administrative session would be item number 1 from the previous consent agenda. Okay.
Okay.
So the, what we did here, and left is north, this is a,
Right.
apparently I angered the computer. The roads that are shown on here are roads that cross multiple parcels or are not contained within a single parcel. Either they cross them as they go, or like half of the one side of the road is in one parcel or the other. And what Lakeside, what the partners wanted to do, all the different landowners, is dedicate a plat that provided dedications of the streets that did cross multiple property owners and were required to develop initial phases, so that we knew we could get Center Street all the way from the frontage road to 2600 West, and then we could get 2600 West / Spanish Fork Main Street all the way from 4 South up to the north boundary of the project. And so that as we installed utilities, or as the development installs utilities or needs to improve roads, that no property owner can hold another property owner hostage over access to the property or dedication of the street. So all these streets will allow the underground infrastructure that's necessary to start the project and the actual streets that are necessary to develop initial phases of the project to go to be dedicated and be available for improvement of whoever is ready to do that, depending on the phases of development, without having to individually contend with individual street dedications among different parties.
And previously, what was the situation?
There was not a previous situation. It's just that as there was never a plat. We had the regulating plan which showed us where the streets go, but all those street so many of those right-of-ways were still wholly or partially in private hands, as private property. Even Center Street, which does go all the way through, is a small little one-lane farm road.
Right.
So to be able to implement the plan and give everybody access to the streets for building roads and putting in utilities, we needed to get at least these initial roads skeleton dedicated.
Okay.
So this doesn't represent any change or deviation from the regulating plan as it was adopted, other than just the movements necessary to engineer the roads and make the boundaries work.
Thank you.
Who's developing the roads? Is it the individual as they go through their phases, or is it just developed?
It depends, as many of my answers are. 2600 West will be built, 2600 West and Center Street will be built by the consortium of property owners based on a kind of a pro rata allocation of cost. And the city will be participating on Lakeside because it is larger than the required road for the project. The required road for the project would be a commercial local, and this is a major arterial, so the city does fund part of that through impact fees. But the other streets are all fully development funded, and those 2600 West and Center Street will be developed by the consortium, and then the rest of the streets will be developed by the property owners in each kind of super pad of the project.
Okay. So is it a consent by all the landowners and everyone agrees this is, or is there?
Yes, that's why there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's like 10 or 12
Great.
dedication signatories on here.
That's great.
Yeah, everybody who it touches, it signs up, which really makes it work well as we move into the future.
Mm. Any additional questions? Okay. Then since it's now an administrative item, we need to vote on it. Do we have a motion for this item?
I would move that we approve the Lakeside Landing Road dedication
Okay,
plan. I guess is the best way I have it, since I don't have another motion on here, so.
sure. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item passes. We will now move to our legislative session, which includes 2 public hearing items. The first public hearing item is Springville Community Development requesting adoption of the Springville Active Transportation Plan. And I believe that'll be Director Yost.
Are we considering item 4? They said they weren't considering that when I got an email from them.
Yeah.
Right, and we'll have to make a motion on it when we get to it.
Okay.
But it's still part of the agenda, so.
Just for notice to anyone in the audience or to you, we need to continue item 4 when we get to that. So if there's anyone here that came to provide comment on item 4, you're welcome to stay, and we can just open a hearing quickly for you to share your comments, or you can watch the agendas for when that will be come back to us for the hearing. There was some last minute findings that we figured out that the applicant and we weren't ready to move that forward.
Thank you for that note.
Yeah. So this is the active transportation plan. It's been a long time coming. There are many people in the room today that have been pedaling for 3 years and trying to get this across the finish line. Luckily, we didn't have anybody have to retire from the race, hopefully, and we'll get this across the finish line in the middle of the peloton. So that is the extent of my cycling references for the day. So active transportation is a means of getting around that's powered by human energy, primarily walking and bicycling, but also any other essentially non-vehicular means of transportation, somebody in a mobility scooter or my daughter riding her rollerblades. The active transportation infrastructure helps solve the mobility problem that we all share as people that drive cars, people that ride bikes, people that walk. It is not an either or proposition or a zero-sum game at all. It's just like the current road infrastructure we use for motorists, but it provides specific facilities for those other road users. And it allows us to give everyone more options to get where they need to go quickly and safely if we build this infrastructure into our transportation improvements as we go along. Everybody, drivers, walkers, bikers, can get where they're going with the greatest safety and with the least amount of hassle because everyone's traffic flow needs are met through careful planning and smart construction. So it's predictable and understandable, and whenever we encounter the active transportation infrastructure, we know how to deal with it, and it provides everyone a level of comfort and safety and predictability. It also helps us move forward together as a city by helping to relieve traffic congestion, increasing mobility and opportunity for everyone independent of their age, ability, or means, and making our city more alive and livable. On my ride my ride into work today, I again appreciated something that's been noted by people that helped us with this plan, that having the opportunity to commute on a bike provides the chance to engage with the world around you in a really gratifying way, to waving at people and saying good morning and noticing the sounds and observing things that I can't when I'm isolated within the confines of my car and traveling at a higher speed. It was really a great way to start my day, and it just reminded me that it really does give people the opportunity to engage in a form of mobility that has a lot of benefits other than just safety and congestion mitigation and other things, but there's a lot of intangibles. Our plan has a very specific and very well thought out set of goals that it seeks to achieve. We spent a couple meetings at the beginning of this process with the Active Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, which I'll discuss in a moment, determining what goals, if achieved, would tell us that we had a successful planning process. And these all are preceded by this should statement. So it should, when implemented, make connections. Connect the things that are most important and most critical to getting around our city for all ages and all abilities. And here we see a mother and a child riding in a protected bike lane or a buffered bike lane on their way to work or way to school. Next, it should be an all abilities and all ages network, so it should be comfortable and low stress for any user. I often cite the example of my daughters that love to ride to West Side, and now one is going to Spring Canyon, and she wants to ride her bike to a 0-hour class. And there's really no safe way for her to get there because we live on 600 North by Premier Auto Care and Beto's, and Spring Canyon is on 7th South on the other side of 4th and on the other side of the railroad tracks. And she wishes there was a way to get there safely, that she could have that independence and be able to access additional educational opportunities. And if we build something that's comfortable for little kids and our senior population, then we know we've made something that's comfortable for everybody. There's another picture of a number of different people of abilities and ages engaging in active transportation. Next, it should promote active living, which is similar to what I talked about with the benefits I felt this morning, that we can integrate movement and exercise and activity into our lives in a natural and holistic way so that we can get our bodies moving and our hearts pumping without having to have our alarm go off at 5:30 in the morning and go spend a certain amount of time at the gym, but that as we add just a little bit of movement to our lives every day, that it has profound health and psychological benefits. this illustrates how people in a place with a good network really engage in more activity throughout their daily lives by walking and biking. It should also increase economic vitality. We have the bones of a great downtown. We think providing easier bike and walking access to that downtown will make it, one, a more comfortable place to be once you get here, and also a more easy and comfortable place to access. Some of the recommendations in this plan connect downtown to our regional trail network that, once we kind of get the whole through Springville done, will essentially get us from the southern Utah County, Santaquin, almost to Ogden on generally separated bicycle facilities. And if we can make this a stop and somewhere where people engage and make it a destination by providing that accessibility, I think it will really help increase the vibrancy of our downtown and other areas of our city. It should also improve air quality, and air quality doesn't come just from vehicle emissions out of the tailpipe, but even if we go to zero emission or electric vehicles, we still have emissions from tire wear, brake wear, and other elements of the car's interaction with the street. They create heavy metals, particulates, and other air quality, other elements that affect our air quality, especially in the area immediately adjacent to our higher capacity streets. We want to preserve this, what is so valuable and important to us as residents of Springville. So altogether, these are the 5 goals or priorities of the plan, and we feel, as we went through the plan, that we referenced them often and made a number of determinations as we were going through the plan when we were having a hard time making a decision. We came back to these and essentially ran our decision back against these criteria to help us understand what the right way forward would be. The plan has a twofold purpose. The first is to reevaluate our existing street and trail corridors and identify opportunities for better connections for bikes and peds. As you'll see later on in the presentation, that was a pretty quick job because our existing street and trail corridors are pretty minimal and pretty disconnected. And as a result of that...
Are we waiting until the end for questions?
Oh, no, if you have a question, I'd
Can we zip back to the previous page?
love to be interrupted, please.
And I mean, I know you went through each of the 5. Which one was the one that said it would improve mobility for all 3, for motor vehicles as well as the others?
So that wasn't one of the goals specifically. It does really fall into the achieve all ages and all abilities network, but that was this introductory.
So it's not one of the objectives
No, it's not one of the objectives. No,
because it's the active transportation plan, but
it's a result more than
it's been taken into account
Yes,
that everyone will benefit from that.
yes. It's more of
Slight benefit.
an outcome than a goal, because any proper investment in active transportation helps everybody. That's it. These were primarily
This was the slide I was thinking of.
yeah, to help establish the mutual understanding that any investments we make in these, investments that we make properly and are properly designed. Some people may bring up Center Street eastbound when it intersects Main Street and how nobody quite behaves properly there. We need to fix that. That's not an example of careful planning and smart construction. But when we do it right, that it inherently provides benefits for all road users. The active transportation is often framed by those either concerned or opposed to these type of investments as being mutually exclusive with vehicle travel and being somehow anti-car. And while there is plenty of anti-car sentiment,
Even on this committee that made this. Yeah.
well, maybe.
Yeah.
As you dig down into the your Facebook forums and go take a deep dive in the NumTop Facebook group when you want to be entertained, the real intention and our key messaging, especially that a lot of the advocacy organizations across the country have focused on, that they really have done a lot of work in focusing group and all kinds of different efforts to help us understand that we need to message it this way, because one, it's the reality, and two, it helps everyone understand that it's a mutual benefit and not something that comes at a cost to vehicles on the road.
Just to be clear, I'm very supportive of this. Just want to make sure that we're not excluding one or the other.
Absolutely.
I do have a question too as we go through, because I'm kind of new on this process. So what kind of parameters have you guys considered, and maybe you'll address that later on, so let me know if I just need to listen. As far as like the future growth goes, I mean, obviously we all want more ability, you know. Even coming to this meeting, I sat at the stop sign right here on Second and waited while 4 cars waited, and then they'd turn to the right, and they'd wait, and then they'd turn, because the traffic on Main Street is so heavy.
Right.
So obviously, and I've lived here between Spanish Fork and Springville for most of my life, and I've seen it go from when there were no freeways to, you know, pretty crazy, and to what we have now. I'm just wondering what kind of like demographics, or what did you guys consider for the future, 20 years from now, for my grandkids? You know, what is, how did you take that into account, or what kind of way do you approach that for this kind of a plan?
It really comes down to, and we'll go through it a little bit, but it comes down to identifying what are the functionally important aspects to Springville in terms of building a system, and then putting the plan in place so that over time, as both the city makes investments and the private sector makes furthers development, that these projects are completed as part of those efforts, using all the synergy we can get and using all of the private development dollars we can, as large areas of the city that have yet to be built out, and making sure that those new areas specifically are built right the first time to provide these opportunities for our growing population, so we don't have to come back in after and try to retrofit.
I think that's a great plan. I'm just trying to understand, are you creating corridors for, you know, basically for bikes to go from Spanish Fort to Orem, or are you creating everywhere corridors? Or
It's the latter. It's everywhere corridors, and you'll see that when we look at the map.
Okay. I'll just listen, and
Yeah.
then if I have a question at the end, I will.
It's less focused on recreational, so you're not going to see us.
I mean, you showed me earlier today,
Yeah,
so
we don't really go into the trails we should be doing up in the foothills or the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. One, because they're outside of our municipal
Sure.
boundaries, but are kind of dealt with other.
I mean,
other
I
groups and
think
other
that the
plans.
trails, like taking the canals that we used to float in as a kid, putting them in a pipe and putting a trail over the top has been phenomenal. I mean, we spend a lot of time on those trails. It's been a great corridor, a great use, so. Okay.
We're thinking doing that to Hubble Creek was going to put it in a pipe, and then we'll put the bike trail on the top.
Yeah. Well,
Dig deep.
Except the pipe doesn't have a top on it, so it's.
Okay.
So I guess I just have one other comment to make, and I'm sure I need to listen as well, but in the process of all of this, like when I was coming down to a meeting at 3:00 today, there was so much traffic on Main Street that I couldn't, they were really backed up even
Yeah.
through the lights. So in making these connections, what are we doing to make sure that we are just not slowing down all the cars to have the walkability, bike trail, et cetera, and make the traffic even worse? Is there something in place in this plan for that?
Yes, nothing that we have in this plan
Is being
is at the expense of vehicular capacity, which, as you get to know me better, you'll see that I don't have a philosophical issue with pushing back on vehicular capacity because of interesting phenomenon we'll get into as we get into the general plan and the transportation plan called induced demand, which basically says the more we expand our infrastructure to accommodate additional traffic, the more we induce additional traffic until it comes back to kind of a static point. And that also applies to biking. If all of a sudden everybody gets on their bike and the congestion goes down, it will pick back up a little bit as people make trips once they see, oh, it's not congested, maybe I'll go back to my car. So there's always an equilibrium, and we end up chasing our tail somewhat when we continue to expand infrastructure to accommodate vehicle throughput at the expense of city building. Like, does anybody think 4th South and Main Street is significantly better now than it was 6 years ago? It's not, but now we have 10 to 12 foot plus more crossing distance for pedestrians. We lost 2 blocks of old growth trees, and it's faster and noisier. So those are the kind of things we balance on a wider scale, but this specific plan doesn't advocate for removing vehicular capacity in any of the corridors. In some cases, it does affect on-street parking, which is an issue, but there's no recommendations that remove lanes or other types of vehicle facilities.
Good question, though.
Yeah, that was a great question. So again, the twofold purpose: reevaluate, evaluate what we've got, and then make plans and policies to move us into the future. I probably should have put a slide in here. A lot of people talk about Amsterdam as being a bike city, and that us or whatever city we're working is never going to be like that because we're not Amsterdam. But the interesting thing is that 50 years ago, Amsterdam wasn't Amsterdam either. It was congested and full of cars and developing in a way that people in the country felt uncomfortable with, and resulted in a lot of auto pedestrian fatalities, and a grassroots movement started. I wish I could say it in Dutch, but it's basically "Stop the Child Murder" was the name of the kind of the tagline of the movement. And it was a grassroots effort that resulted in decisions that now 50 years later have resulted in a completely different city with a completely different transportation system than they would have had otherwise. So where we are today is the result of the decisions we've made in the past, and where we will be in 50 years will be the result of decisions we make today. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that if we start down that path, it can make all the difference. Now, process, this is where I want to give a shout out to the people who really made this happen. Our Active Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, you of which are here tonight, surprisingly. Were Andrew Bird, Carrie Bennett, Jeff Hardy, Jeremy Barker, Jonathan Duncan, Kurt Boucher, and Logan Millsap. Our staff was Bradley Neal, who's no longer with us at the city, and David Ashton, Jeff Anderson, our city engineer, Lance Haight, our public safety director, myself, and we had Eric Rasband and Darren Punker from UDOT, and Kathy Carling, the safety director from Nebo School District. And then we had our council representative, Michael Snelson, who was instrumental in providing the legislative momentum to get the process going and keep it moving. And then our planning commission rep, our own Karen Ellingson. Over the course of 3 years, they attended 18 meetings and reviewed multiple drafts and helped with public outreach, and were of immense value to the process. And then the consultant team, which we feel we really picked the right team, was a team, Alta Planning and Design was the key, or the prime consultant, led by Mac Drazich, which I never say that right, so he's going to hear this recording and shrug. And then they had Farron Piers as a sub-consultant to them, with Maria Vias heading up that team, doing most of the analytical data work and GIS work. So again, thank you so much to staff, citizens, and our elected and appointed officials who helped us shepherd this process. So we started out evaluating existing conditions. The first thing was active trip potential, which is evaluating all the trips that are made in the city with aggregated data about all the trips that are made in the city, which you'll see in the plan, some of those diagrams that have all the lines connecting everything in a crazy spider web. That's a graphic representation of trip analysis. And that basically looked and said, how many of these trips are within a certain distance or within a certain area, and there's a threshold at which they're considered to be potentially convertible to a bike trip. And then we analyzed where people are coming from and going to determine what destinations could be connected or would be most important to be connected. And then we also investigated bicycle and pedestrian crashes across the city and developed a heat map showing us where problem spots were that were statistically significant in terms of bike and ped incidents. Then we evaluated transit, which sadly is a quick evaluation in Springville because there's 2 routes that follow the same route. But we also looked into the future. Actually today, and this still holds up, our current network has 5.3 miles of bike lanes, which this is a picture of either River Bottom Road or 8th South here up on the top. And as Commissioner Anderson mentioned today, we don't really like those because you're so close to the cars on the one side, they're going to hit you, and you're so close to the doors of parked cars on the other side that you're going to run into one of them. So it's not great. It's really kind of giving somebody the illusion of some degree of safety. Buffered bike lanes are an improvement on that, and we have a very small amount of that where there's actually a distance or a physical buffer between the cars, but not a physical separation. So you got a little more paint to protect you. And then we have our biggest category behind bike lanes is our side paths and shared use paths, which are entirely totaled by Devon Glen, Dry Creek, and the Canyon path, neither of which really connects to another path. So if you want to drive your bike to the trailhead and ride your bike up the canyon, you're set. This is the map of existing bikeways and trails. It's, like as I mentioned, pretty minimal. If you look at the more regional picture, you can see this facility coming down from Provo, and then there will be future facilities to the west of the freeway. And then you can see the Mapleton Lateral Trail coming up from Mapleton. Springville is, on the regional scale, kind of a gaping hole in the network, and we want to remedy that. Next, we went out and did a lot of community engagement. We had an online survey, which we were just absolutely thrilled with the amount of engagement we had in that survey. We had 627 total survey responses that answered questions ranging from how they would like to use bikeways and trails, why they like to walk, bike, or roll, how often they do it, and the things that keep them from doing it. It was a great survey, and again, much more participation than we anticipated. Part of this community engagement was an online interactive map, which you see here, where people had the opportunity to come and draw facilities or suggested routes, identify barriers, and identify destinations to essentially crowdsource a lot of information to help us get a basic understanding of the lay of the land in Springville. And this was, again, also a very productive exercise, and you can see how many community destinations and how many barriers are kind of centered on our Plat A and our downtown area. We then post...
Are you going to talk about the barriers in a minute? I know I read about them in the...
barrier, like what they are specifically, or what we...
What you plan to do about them, especially, I'm thinking mostly maybe the railroads.
Yes, so there are, as you move farther on in the plan, there's a spot improvement map. So we have 2 kinds of recommendations. We have corridors, which are, bike lanes, side paths, trails, and then we also have spot improvements, which are places we need to fix a railroad crossing, fix a street crossing, fix an intersection. So those are all addressed in individual recommendations in the giant...
I didn't get all the way through the thing.
Yeah, matrix of recommended. Yeah. And there are so many, like again, my daughters would ride to school and they come down 4th West and then go over Center Street. And I get there and, they're this big. At least one is now. They grow. And how do you do that? Well, we cross Center Street over on this side, and then we cross 4th West, and then we go across the rail. And I said, well, how do you know that nobody's coming over the rail when you're crossing Center Street? Well, We don't. We just try to be careful.
Plus at
So,
School time, there's 200 cars backed up there. And
right. And I mean, once they get over by the school, they got crossing guards that help them. But it's there are many spaces like that that are even worse. Not that they're more than unsafe. They are just actual physical barriers. You can't get past them. And like at the east end of the Devon and Glen Trail, you come to the railroad and go, well, I guess I'll go back to 950 West.
It's a fun loop.
It is, and my kids really like where the roots have raised the
Yes.
trail, and they kind of, it's like a pump track or like a jump line. Yeah.
That's our favorite too.
So we basically sent all this data back to our consultants who use their professional expertise and understanding to make technical analysis of our network, all of our origin destinations, all these existing conditions, and provide an online interactive map, which showed the recommended corridors and the recommended spot improvements. And the spot improvements are represented by the dots, the circles, I guess. And then what we did is we took this back out to the public and had the public prioritize, provide us input on what would be their highest priority routes and highest priority spot improvements. And you can see that here with the darker spot improvements and routes being received the most votes. As a caveat to that second online survey, we got surprisingly little engagement with that survey. So it really became just one small piece of input into prioritizing the network. It was by no means a major input. Most of the prioritization was done in a more technical sense, and I'll kind of review how we did that. So these are the criteria we used to that we had the public help us rank for prioritizing the active transportation projects and how the results came back. And it really turned out, and we agreed that connecting community resources, filling the gaps, and overcoming barriers were by far the most important priorities when we were evaluating each project. So then, again, we went away and, after the active transportation ad hoc committee met and
Sorry,
reviewed.
can you go
Go
back
ahead.
to that? Can you go back?
Yeah.
So I know you didn't get a great response, you were saying, but I was surprised that number 4 is the safety piece.
Yeah.
So safety is number 4, not in the top 3.
Yeah, that was interesting
Yeah.
to me too.
Okay.
Because
All right.
if the connections aren't safe and they don't have, I think it may be because
None of that
separation,
matters, yeah,
maybe it was too technical of a term,
maybe.
but maybe we would have said safe connections, or we would
'Cause
have
I
gotten a
would
different
think that would
response.
be a priority for the city to make
Yeah.
sure that people are.
And this doesn't represent how we,
It's just
It's
there.
just
it's how it was ranked by the respondents to the survey.
And how did you send out for response? I'm just curious. I hadn't seen
Uh,
this before.
through all this same social media and other city communication channels we used for the first one, we retained email addresses from anyone who offered it for the first. We were at the farmers market and got additional emails and additional feedback. We sent out. We included it in the city newsletter, and for some reason, with just as much exposure for the second survey, we just for some reason missed something.
I wonder if people just assume maybe that if we're gonna, connect community resources, overcome existing barriers, and fill a gap, that the city's planning on making it so it's gonna be safe for people to do that.
Yeah, you don't have to take your life in your hands to do that.
Or you could look at it, and the way I'm seeing that the mind flow may have been on this is that 1, 2, and 3 are the places they want to get to. 4 is saying, once you've made these connections, here's how I'm going to feel safe using them, is by having some sort of barrier between me and there. But if the connection's not there in the first place,
But I mean,
It
if
doesn't
these
matter.
are the questions, one of them is safety
Yeah.
right there.
yep.
So it's,
And some people may not have read that as safety. I think
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
another kind of confounding variable.
The reason I asked, I was curious, because this is my first, of course, I've only been here for a few weeks, so this is my first ever of hearing about, and I don't, to be honest with you. We pay our bill online. I go to work, I get up, I go to work, I'm not really big on social media. So I was just curious how you're creating the response, if it's, so, thank
Was
you.
there ever something in the newsletter, do you remember?
Yeah, but if you pay your bill online and you
You don't.
decline, we pay our bill
Yeah,
automatically,
We're
but
paperless.
we don't decline the paper because we like to get the paper for some reason, even though,
We still get the newsletter even electronically.
yeah, but a lot of people don't
Read it, right?
see it, don't read it.
140 emails a day, I'm like totally
Yep.
gone past that.
Yeah.
I just was curious how it was, or
Yeah,
how the communication method was. I think it's fantastic, and I appreciate, thank you for all you guys' hard work and for everything that you've done. I just find it, I had never heard of it before, so.
We're always,
I do have my head in the sand sometimes, but,
We all do.
and we're always looking, it is an accurate and important critique that we could always do better in terms of facilitating engagement and awareness.
yeah, I was just curious. I hadn't seen it. That's to be just me.
So we ranked the criteria and then reviewed the output, and although we trusted the algorithm, it did do a couple funny things, so we made some manual tweaks to it based on our local knowledge and the ad hoc committee, and that helped us arrive at a recommended network. And the recommended network in numbers gives us 2.8 miles of bike lanes, so you don't see that we actually reduce the number of bike lanes because they're really not something we want. We ended up with almost over 17 miles of buffered bike lanes, almost 30 miles of shared use paths, 8 miles of separated bikeways, which is a new to us, where it's actually a physical barrier between the bikes and the streets, or the bike lane may even be up on the sidewalk as we're proposing on Main Street. And that's really where we want to get, and over time we'll, as we make progress, continue to move some of those buffered bike lanes to separated bikeways, because that's the ideal when we get to that point, then everybody really is comfortable and it's clear to everyone how the system works. And we're again, or as we all know, a smaller city with a lot of calm, low-stress streets as it is. So we have a lot of proposed bicycle boulevards, which are quiet neighborhood streets that have low vehicle volumes and speeds. And we prioritize bicycles and walking on those streets by traffic calming. And this is the one area where we probably do create intentionally traffic calming measures to slow people down, but we don't want people driving. Really, I'd rather design our streets and neighborhoods to keep people at 20, because we typically don't kill people when we run into them in a car at 20 miles an hour. And that's really what bicycle boulevards are. If you've been on 2nd East in Provo from 300 South to 800 North, that's Bicycle Boulevard. And it has some roundabouts and bulb outs and not dedicated lanes, but it slows the traffic down enough that it's comfortable to share.
And again, I didn't finish going through it, but is this mapped out yet?
Yes.
The miles are specific? so
Yes.
The map is as well, great.
So that was kind of my next question. So if they're all mapped out and everything, and this is approved and it's approved by the city council, then this moves forward as the maps are in here.
Yes, correct. Just like the transportation.
So question then, on the 17.2 miles where they take a buffered bike lane from, what do you do for parking? How do you get it? I mean, there's only so much space.
Yeah, some facilities.
So what do you do? Do you just, like, if it comes past your house, then you can no longer park in front of your house?
Depends on what the facility is like. On Center Street, where we painted a buffered bike lane when we rebuilt that street in 19 and 20, it didn't hamper any of the parking because Center Street's so wide. We were able to paint in a very generous buffered bike lane from Main Street to 4th East and then continue up. We didn't have to go to shared lanes until 8th East. So there may be some places where we have to balance between on-street parking and AT facilities. That's been difficult in Provo, but it's been worked through. 500 West, as you head south, if you're going 500 West, instead of turning at 300 South, if you take it all the way down to Lakeview Parkway, you'll eventually get to an area where there is no on-street parking because there's not room for parking in the bike lanes.
And
So is there 17.2 miles now of the city that no longer
No,
will have parking?
no.
So I'm gonna, are you finished?
Or 21 miles, or 25 miles.
Well, I'm just saying that I'm just looking at
He's
buffered
looking at
bike lanes.
Mm-hmm.
But I was gonna ask about the bicycle boulevards. Again, I haven't seen the maps. So are there cities that will be impacted by the things that Ralph just described? Or sorry, cities, did I say cities? Neighborhoods.
Citizens.
Neighborhoods that will be impacted, and so citizens that will be impacted. And if so, have we adequately communicated with these people? Because I know that in the past, we haven't had a real great track record of dealing with our citizens before it was too late.
With the bicycle boulevards, they are not a specific design prescription. There is a wide, or a very large toolkit of implementation measures that can be used on a bicycle boulevard to accomplish the traffic calming intent. And as we went to start scoping and doing concepts for each project, these are just lines on a map right now. We still have to actually go do concept designs and construction drawings and analysis for each individual project. That's when we would start bringing in the neighbors, because there may be some places where, hey, we're putting a little neighborhood traffic circle on an intersection, or we're doing bulb outs, and you're going to, a couple on-street parking spaces may be sacrificed, or perhaps there's a through road that we want to essentially
So
cut off.
they essentially don't get any input because we've already made the decision where it's going to go.
No,
And you're going to tell them, hey, you're going to lose some spots here. This is
no. Again, because the design, it's not a design prescription here. We can do chicanes, bulb outs, traffic.
But again, I mean, the question was asked earlier, is this map final? And if it is final, and people lose parking, and we haven't talked to these people, I don't care whatever the design is, if they lose 2 spots of parking or whatever, we haven't talked to these people, then shame on us.
Yeah,
We haven't done our job.
I agree with that because I live by the high school, and so I've lived there for almost 30 years. So I've seen it transition from, when I was in high school. Actually, it's been longer than 30 years, but anyway, all I'm saying is we've gone from a part where people would park next to their house. Their house, maybe it wasn't designed, or they couldn't afford to pave or do something else to give them additional parking. To there's basically all the kids were parking up, and Ann will talk about it, So everyone's parking up and down the streets, so then that we had kids parking. I mean, it's kind of funny because my kids used to park. They used to leave my house, drive 1 block, park in the church parking lot, then they'd run over to the high school, and then at lunchtime they had a free car, right? They could go and Ann knows, she knows my kids. So anyway, all I'm saying is that that corridor has had a dramatic impact, and I agree with you. No one really is getting an opportunity to say, I realize that we all have to sacrifice to a certain extent, but if you're taking a bicycle boulevard through someone's neighborhood and they can no longer park on the street, that's a big impact to some people. So I'm just curious tell me how that process works.
We go out on each facility and we say, what design do we implement in this facility to achieve what we want to achieve? And we determine whether A, B, C, D, all on through tool is the appropriate tool. In this case, we balance the impacts to property owners, we balance the impacts to transportation, vehicle transportation, to on-street parking, all of those together, and arrive at something that, from whatever criteria we're trying to use at that point, that is amenable to all the parties. And we're not ever going to make everybody happy. But bicycle boulevards by no means are universal or even generally facilities where we're going to remove on-street parking. We generally want to keep on-street parking on these smaller streets because it narrows them and keeps people moving slowly.
I understand, because I realize that we're like, we're on the same page, so
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I love the paths, I ride my bike, I do all that kind of stuff. But if someone was to come and say, we're gonna make a truck path through a neighborhood because we wanna get the trucks off Main Street, and they put them right past your house, I can guarantee that, like, you would want input into that.
Yeah, of course.
And this is, we're doing just the opposite now, is we're turning around and saying to other people, we're gonna change your neighborhood, where you bought, how you live, and I think that we need to have the appropriate input for people. I've never heard of the transportation plan till last week. And maybe I'm a good test for that, because I've just been going around for the last 30 years, going through the city, paying my bills, you know, complaining about traffic on Main Street. And when I was asked to serve, I thought, okay, you can either complain, right, or you can be part of the solution. So that's what I'm asking, is I think that I agree, I think that with others, is we need to make sure that whoever's, you know, if we're gonna implement a plan and, you know, 80% of the people haven't heard about it, know about it, you know, that's gonna be a big significant issue, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
And I
Yeah.
think the big question is, you're talking about people who might be upset about something in their neighborhood. If we come back and try to work with them, and no, you're not always gonna please everyone, but really, when we approve this, what we're saying is, this is the plan. We work with people, we do the best we can, but in the end, this is the plan and we're moving forward.
Yes,
Fair?
Sure.
So the reason I asked this question, and Liz can attest to this, we are not very good at working with community members who are impacted by some of our development projects. We've got a lot of black eyes in the past, and I would just really hate for us to just say, this is the plan, screw you guys, instead of sitting down and saying, this is the plan, let's figure out how we make it best for you, before we just go plowing in there with, you know, and start changing things.
and
Because
Josh?
we've done that so many times in the past, and I would hate to see that.
Maybe you can talk about what kind of flexibility we have within statute for this type of plan, as far as we approve the map, what kind of adjustments can be made to it later?
we can, as with any master plan, it should be subject to continual refinement and change. Plans are never static if we're doing our job right, but this bicycle boulevard element, I'm glad that it's come up, especially Troy Fitzgerald, our city administrator, was really trying to help everyone understand that, hey, there are 25 miles here that says bicyclists are prioritized by managing vehicle speeds and volumes.
Yeah.
That's a change from the way we handle our local streets today. And it's really asked everyone in an internal kind of staff perspective, does everyone understand what that means? And maybe I'm just not listening well enough. The bicycle boulevards, maybe I just haven't communicated well that the bicycle boulevards doesn't say we're going to do a specific thing on your street, just that we're going to do something on your street. We don't know what that thing is yet.
And how does that facilitate? How does that happen? I guess that's what we're asking.
That's when we would say, hey, we're now looking at let's say we're redoing, I don't know streets.
Let's
well
do
enough.
Pheasant Run Drive, that's
Okay, let's say we're doing Pheasant Run Drive.
no problem.
And-
So I pay my bills online and everything else, and then we turn around, and now, how do I know that somebody's making a decision?
When we
on-
go and do that project, or when we're starting to say, hey, next year we're thinking about doing Pheasant Run Drive, that's when we go out and we mail or deliver a notice to everybody along the street.
Okay.
We have meetings and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the master plan says we should be doing something on this street. These are the tools that we can use and the options we have. And these are the impacts, the pros and cons to each different iteration of a bicycle boulevard. And we make sure that we work through them through the whole process, through design, through implementation, and aftercare. we don't want to do what San Diego did last year. They, without telling any proactive public engagement other than it was on their plan, went out and changed a residential road that was really a minor collector into what's called advisory lanes, which makes a lot of people's heads explode because it is saying the street is now one lane for two directional travel. And the outside, there's a lane in the middle for cars and there's a lane on each side for bikes. You drive in the middle lane unless there's a car coming, and then you pull over and make sure there's not a bike so that you can cross. But generally you stay in the middle lane. And they just came out one day, recoded the street, painted it, stuck the delineators down, and let the traffic come. And there were news stories, and a friend of mine who's a YouTuber that does transportation stuff flew down there to interview people and document it. And it probably set back their efforts to improve their active transportation plan by who knows how many years.
But we're not doing that.
And we're not going to. We don't want to do that.
I'm going to harp for a little bit more. Josh, you did do a good job explaining, I would say. But, based on our historical actions, we've been terrible at this. We have been. And I can go black eye after black eye. One of the biggest is the Westfield neighborhood. Nobody knew about it. It was posted in the places you were talking about, Ralph, but nobody knew about it until last second, and then they stormed this place, but it was too late. It's too late. So, we should be, and again, I agree with Troy, that's a lot of miles of bicycle boulevards. And so we should be winning the hearts and minds of these people sooner than later.
Absolutely.
Because the day you go in and throw something on the door and say, yeah, we're about to start construction here, you can come down and have some input, and then we're going to start construction. It's too late.
I think it's also important to mention that this is a huge plan that's going to take years and a lot of funding. So it'll be done incrementally in stages. So that does give us quite a bit of buffer, as you may say, to do that community outreach and inform and solicit feedback as we move into each phase of the plan.
That's why I was asking about the population, because my wife's grandmother has a house down on North Main Street. And I talked to you about it today. When that house was built, there was nothing but, wagons going past that house. And so every time they did an improvement, a little more of the front yard got disappeared, a little more, and the speed started to increase, right? Till you're 50 miles an hour going past that house. And then the city came in and painted the curb red and said, because it's a dangerous thing for you to try to stop and make a turn into the house that you've had now for, that's been in the family for hundreds of years, you can no longer park on that street. So she had given up land. So I think it's really important that we recognize that some people can't make changes, they can't afford big changes in their property or whatever else. And so I think it's great that you're going to do that incrementally, but I think we have to look at population, because I'd be curious to know how many people lived in this city, 50 years ago. I didn't.
1,000.
I lived in another city 50 years ago, but so our population's going to change, right? And we're going to have more cars, more all that kind of stuff, so we have to have some way of adapting, because we want our kids, right? My wife wants her kids to live around us. So you don't want to bring out the mama bear in that woman.
I actually think some of these are a little scary. As I look closer at the map, I see that one of these is in front of my house that's up by the reservoir. And I can tell you right now that there are a lot of cars that go up and down that road. There's not a ton of bicycles out in the road. Like, there just isn't. I can sit on my front porch. There's not a lot. If bicycles get painted on that road, then it suggests it's a free-for-all, and that makes me more nervous than if it wasn't there. Because, well, it just means that everyone will think, well, this is a bike path. We can go on the bikes here, and we don't have to worry about the cars. But it's a neighborhood. There are lots of cars.
Are you talking
And
about
people pulling out of their driveways.
You're talking about precedence, like if this is a bike lane, then the cyclists
Well,
feel
I'm
like they
looking at
have
this picture
precedence
that
over
says
cyclists.
Bicycle Boulevard.
Mhm.
So to me, that looks like bikes can
Yeah.
go up and down the street either way.
It's a
And
safe bike spot, yeah.
It's a safe bike spot, but what about the people who live on that street and the cars that are going up and down it? To me, I would almost feel more nervous now, because now I'm sharing it with bikes going everywhere, which aren't going there now. You know, like I'm nervous for people getting run over. That doesn't seem safe to me.
Not everybody cycles the same way, and some, like, children are just doing this.
Yeah, and that's why we
if
don't
they're
just
thinking
go out
this
and,
is a straight way to go to the reservoir, somebody's gonna get killed.
that's why we don't go out and just paint sharrows on the street. We make sure that we manage vehicle speeds and volumes. So it's a collection of multiple tools and careful analysis. We're not just gonna paint these are called sharrows, that's what those markings are called. A sharrow out on the ground and suggest to people that now there's some significant difference in the safety of the facility for them. I mean, bikes already have the legal right to take the lane, obviously, but we want to, where we suggest, we don't want to put bicycle boulevards in that aren't fully vetted and fully designed.
So I guess that's my question. Looking at this, it looks like it's the entire street. Is it just a?
No, this is just
Okay.
an example picture. This is just chart junk. You could cross it off.
Okay, but let's go back to my street then
Mhm.
on Pheasant Run Drive. It's a residential street. If you park a car on each side of the road, okay, just, parked in front of the house, you're having family dinner, got 3 cars coming, there's 3 on each side, there's barely room for cars to go past each other. So even though that you don't have a lot of traffic on it, there's barely, so what you're saying is, where would you put those signs, to say that this is a bike boulevard? I mean, that wouldn't, I agree with Ann, it's not gonna tell someone, like one of my grandkids that gets on his bike and he sees, or your daughter, someone looks on there and sees, oh, it's a bike path, this is my space, right? This is where I can ride, this is where I live in safety, right? Because they've come all the way up 8th South, turns into 9th South, right? It's safety, now they turn into the neighborhood and they see these signs. I'm just curious how that's being handled. I mean, obviously you've studied it, you
Yeah,
talked
it's-
about it. How do you make that transition?
I don't think we've studied every street they're on, because.
No, I'm not
Done
saying the
that yet.
streets, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the strategy of creating bike boulevards.
Okay.
It is very well established and very well studied for decades in the U.S. and in other countries. And it is, again, a combination of strategies to calm, slow traffic, make the traffic. It's primarily vehicle strategies. We're trying to tell the cars, hey, there are other people here, and this is a route that is used by bikes and other people. And both through a combination of signage, which you've noted is in the image, and actual physical changes to the streets, like we are listed here, curb bouts, chicanes, which are kind of lateral offsets in lanes, pinch points where we narrow up the street, traffic circles, or even in some instances preventing vehicles from crossing a street, kind of closing a crossing to vehicles but keeping it open to walking and biking to prevent or limit through traffic in certain areas where it becomes problematic. All those things are studied and employed, and each of those elements, bulb outs, chicanes, pinch points, all have statistically defined efficacy measures that tell us how much each of those strategies are likely to decrease vehicle speed, and then we can analyze them objectively by combining them and studying them with the specific character of each street to determine what needs to be done to make it effective, which is what Public Works is currently doing, is they're investigating some intersections around the city.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you. So we've got these all mapped out already,
Yes.
and this kind of goes to what Ann was saying earlier, but all these are mapped out. What studies were done to determine that Ann Street would be a bicycle boulevard? Why was Ann Street determined to be a bicycle boulevard? What studies were done?
So number of factors.
What studies were done?
This study.
Yeah, but, okay, what did they do to determine?
They analyzed the entire network, determined where bike trips happen, where bike trips could happen based on the probability and
So it was
suitability.
based on probability, not, there wasn't any kind of a traffic cam set up?
No,
that kind of
no,
stuff?
Brett,
Anything?
let me finish the explanation. They analyzed the network. They analyzed the width of the streets. They analyzed the traffic volume.
What's the network, sorry?
Where the streets are, how they connect, and how traffic moves to those streets
Okay.
with very sophisticated models.
But did they do that like for our cell phone data, or how do they know what traffic? How does someone know what car went up 4th South?
That's the
We used
I
very.
mean, I'm just under.
Yeah,
asking.
it's
This is
called.
not confrontation.
No.
Oh, it is for me.
This is,
Yeah.
no, I'm just trying to understand.
We
what-
got special dispensation from a grant that Bike Utah received to provide what's called streetlight data for this process, which is aggregated mobile location data, which is pretty much the industry standard now for broad area traffic studies. So that's where all of those maps that show origins and destinations and volume, and how many people that come through North Main Street are going out the south end of Main Street, all
So
those kind of
cameras on the
questions.
street lights and stuff like that. That's how they.
No, we don't use cameras. We use
No, I mean the.
we use the lidar on the traffic.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, we use all those Wavetronics lidars. Those give us movement counts for every single intersection where those are present. So basically, all of our signalized intersection have Wavetronics lidar on them, and they give us. Actually, we can go in and get real time data for every single lane. How many people are going through there? How many people bust the light? How many people kind of bust the light?
That's for this busy area, right?
Anywhere
There's
there's
no Wavetronics on
no.
Anson.
That's where we use the model, the traffic model, and the
based on
streetlight
other
data.
cities and
based on. I mean, we can get super technical, and we could talk about transit analysis zones. I mean, transportation analysis zones. So the whole county has a transportation model built for it that takes into account where people live, where people work, where people shop, and what all the land uses are, what type of trips each type of land use generates, what people's preferences are in terms of directness of route, time of day, time of trip, like duration of trip, and that the county is broken down into what we call transportation analysis zones, which are small statistical boxes that allow us to aggregate data for maybe just a couple blocks and determine how many trips come in and out of those zones, and then assign those trips to facilities, and then determine traffic volumes and projected level of vehicle traffic on those facilities for A, B, C, D time threshold into the future. And that's
so in a case like Ann Street, sorry to keep using your street, but that they're looking at how many houses there are on that street.
Yes.
How many, how many cars are going in and
Yes.
out of there versus how many people are headed for the reservoir.
yes,
And
not
those are looking, and the traffic that comes to the reservoir comes from the neighborhoods below. It's not people driving there because they can't park there.
right.
But there's also 2 roads on there that go off fairly steep, and one of them is outlined for one of these bike things. And I can tell you, one time, my husband and I were going down the road, and a bike came off one of those going so fast, didn't bother to stop and look when they got to River Bottom Road, just blew right through it. Like, they were honestly lucky they didn't get killed. So I think that's my biggest concern, is by creating these markings that say bike trail everywhere, we just need to be real careful that it's a safe place to do that.
Right.
Because I think there are some places that aren't safe to do that.
Yeah, and that's again
By
back to
approving this plan, we're basically saying you have freedom on all of these spots, even though maybe we haven't looked at them close enough.
but
And I know you
again,
can't.
we're
Like,
not going to just go out and drop a facility in a place without studying exactly
But
how
you
that.
already studied it. Guess that's what our question is.
We've studied the network. That these are the places connections need to be made. We haven't said that on River Bottom Drive, we need a bulb out, a speed bump, and a chicane to accomplish making a bicycle boulevard, but that facility is the right kind of road with the right type of traffic volume and the right width with the right adjoining land uses, that it is the proper place to have a bike boulevard to accomplish the goals of the plan. And then when we go and put that on the ground, we'll spend a lot of time figuring out how to actually, what that line actually is in terms of on-the-ground construction.
I think it's important to remember too that bicycles have the right to be doing that. We're just doing other things to help make it safer. Like bicycles have the right to just use the roads however cars do.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like I think there's a lot of focus on this specific picture, maybe in a picture of a bulb out instead. But there are other measures than just the painting on there and walking away.
Right.
You know, like these bulb outs, they do a lot to slow traffic, the pinch points, you know, and there are natural pinch points that occur, like on 3rd South. It's very narrow when you have cars on both sides. So you don't speed down 3rd South. You have to make sure that you take turns sometimes and that kind of a thing. And so there's natural points like that. This bicycle boulevards will be, as you look at the different situations, this one works better for a bulb out. This one would easily go to a pinch point so that, you know, you're slowing down the traffic as a whole and making it so that the bicyclists feel as comfortable as a car would on those roads, because it doesn't feel like it's a freeway.
And
kind of
without doing what Ann's concerned about, is providing a false sense of safety or
Yes,
security.
that's my
Yeah.
And
And
and I think
that's all of our goal is to have our kids. get
and that,
home,
yeah,
right?
that's why
We all
that
want-
is a,
You want your daughter, I want my grandson, whatever, I want them to come home safe, but I want them to know that that's a place that they can go. I mean, 'cause as quiet as Pheasant Run Drive is, I was the first on the scene with someone that passed away right in my intersection. And it was a motorcycle, and it was a high school kid in a car. It's slow, it's everything else, but I'm just saying, I know we all have our own experiences, but I think it's critical that we create, you know, a path that is safe for everybody to go. I know it's what you're trying to do too.
yeah, that's why
I
that,
think-
And by the
I
way,
think
Josh,
one of my
I'm
concerns-
supportive.
Oh, I
of
know.
this, just to be clear. I saw your
we are. We
frustration
just have
come out a little, but I'm gonna ask these questions.
yeah, well,
and,
that's what you're here for.
And,
Oh, before you ask another question, can we give Genevieve just a minute to ask her question?
Oh, I just, one of the concerns that I haven't seen addressed in here is possible ways to increase bicycle safety, like knowledge, you know, that people using bicycles know that, I'm assuming that person blew through a stop sign that you were talking about, that's not illegal.
Yeah.
It
That's
is legal.
not for bicycles,
they're supposed to stop.
they're supposed to stop. And so they're supposed to,
Are they or aren't they?
No.
I don't remember
They
if
don't
that,
have to
if
stop.
that
If
bill
they can
got
look
through
both
the
directions,
legislature.
They
Right.
can go through the stop sign without stopping. That's a new law. That's
Doesn't mean be stupid.
Then
No, I
then
totally-
really
I
think
totally
we have
hear
to be
that,
careful.
don't
We
be
have to
stupid.
obey any laws.
But they don't
ask
have
Logan.
the same
I
law.
know, that's what I'm.
Logan?
I try not to stop when I cross Center
Logan?
Street, honestly.
No, but you can,
Bicycle have to
you
stop
know,
at a
is
stop
that,
sign?
If the intersection is clear, you can go through the stop sign.
right?
It's called the Idaho stop because they're the ones that kind of pioneered this. And the idea is that, well, not the idea, the data shows that it's safer for cyclists to go through the stop sign if there's not cross traffic.
Right, but if you're going down Fourth, I go down Fourth East all the time. And if you're going down Fourth East and there's a bicyclist next to you and you hit Center Street, not every bicyclist, but I would say 80% of the bicyclists, some of them slow a little bit, but most of them, if you look both ways, boom, they're going through it.
Well, and I'll admit, I do the same, especially when you're on a bike, you have better viewing than when you're in a car.
Absolutely,
You're sometimes, you have to just kind of
I love the rule too, okay. I love it, I'm just trying to be clear that that's
But-
probably what
My
Ann's talking
Yeah,
about.
my concern is, until we hit someone that wasn't paying any attention. And this is neither here nor there for this discussion, but that's my concern, is that we make sure that we're doing things that are safe, not just saying, we put this on here and we're doing it come hell or high water, you know?
Yes, and that's never the intent.
Yeah, I know that.
One of the things that's gonna have to take place, and, you know, this is gonna be, some of us, myself definitely, will not see the fruition of these things in our community. Now, one of the things that we do in the high school to teach young people how to drive is we have a driver safety course. I will tell you right now that 1 out of almost every 10 bicyclists do not use proper etiquette. If you want to go over and check this out, because I walk a trail every day, when a bicyclist comes up behind a pedestrian, they have to call out. They have to warn the person. They don't do it. So all I'm suggesting is, we'll have, when this comes to fruition, we're going to have courses in our
Yeah.
high school for bike etiquette.
That's the thing.
And bike etiquette
Education.
goes beyond whether or not you can legally drive through a stop sign. I go up Center Street every morning to go walking with a friend of mine. There are cyclists who come down Center Street and they're 4 abreast. That's not bike etiquette. I mean, the lane there is, you can say that they have the right to that street, but if a car is coming down the road, they have to stop because there's another car coming in the opposite direction. And those cyclists could easily pull over into that bike lane and go single file and let the cars go through. That's bike etiquette. Maybe it's not the rule of law, but we need to teach etiquette in these things so that the things that are proposed here will work effectively.
Right.
Okay.
Both.
I agree, because I think the e-bike is a new twist we're looking at.
Absolutely.
As I walk the trail, I ride bikes on the trail. I can't tell you how many times someone passes me going 30 miles an hour on the Mapleton Trail on an e-bike. They haven't said on your left, on your right. If I would trip or something, they would probably lose, because I'm not a little guy. Okay, but
Yeah,
So-
But
and just
anyway,
keep
that's
it
not part of this,
support,
but I'm
right.
just trying to say that I think we have to create safe places.
Oh,
And I
absolutely.
think if someone thinks it's a bike lane, it's my place, I can go there and I don't have to worry about anything, then I think that's what we have to be careful of.
I agree.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we want cyclist education, we want to make sure there's safety, we want to make sure there's community engagement. Any feedback I'm missing? I know I asked you to hold your comment for a second. Would you like to make your comment? Is that a fair summation of this discussion? Okay.
I think public input's probably my biggest issue, is I think we need to have, and I know you've studied models, but it sounds to me like we're talking about approving, you're being asked to approve a plan that's gonna say this street gets that tentatively, and then when someone wants to develop it or they want to do something, then they say, well, this is the way it's going to be. So maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but that's what I think you're asking us to do, right?
Yeah, but more importantly, so that when the city or the state or a private developer comes in and builds something, that we can say, like Spanish Fork does, hey, there's an 8-foot side path that you have to build here. And they say, no, I don't want to build that. And we can say, now here's the plan, here's the transportation plan. You've got to build this. This is important to us. And so that we can go get capital funding from the federal government, the regional governments, and
I think that's fair on new development. I'm concerned about, like, what do you do for Brookside? You know what I mean?
Brookside's clearly a context that you have to, that
You
doesn't
see
get
what I'm
a,
saying? just every neighborhood, it could be my neighborhood or whatever, anyone else's, but you have existing people living existing ways.
Right.
Been paying taxes for 60 years, and then if they're told, well, you no longer live in the same city, then I think that's where we have unfair, things, so.
Yeah, that's why we're going to go out and engage before we ever put anything on a street, and why we tried so hard to engage in this plan as well.
So I suppose a fair question would be, what kind of assurance can you provide to the commission that these considerations that we've brought up as far as community engagement, making sure it's a micro level planning and safety are all taken into account? What kind of assurance can you give us that that will be part of the process going forward and not just something that we theoretically talk about here?
I think the best thing to do would be to take your comments and concerns and come into the plan on page getting there, sorry. 5, page 47, section 5, chapter 5, which is the policy and program recommendations that kind of tell us how to do the doing of the plan.
Procedural document?
Yeah, the procedural guidelines essentially. It tells us everything about that we need to do counts so that we can understand the performance of the network and how things are changing, that we need wayfinding, we need, there's a number of things. There's complete streets policy, there's all kinds of policy recommendations in here, all the way down to zoning and bike parking. We can add a couple paragraphs in here that say, essentially that no individual facility should be implemented without the engagement and collaborative design of the people immediately impacted along the corridor, or with a spot improvement, that we should add a policy in here that we should partner with Bike Utah, which already has a really awesome bike school. They have a big trailer and they go to elementary schools, because high school is way too late. It
Yeah.
needs to be.
No.
Not really
Little-
though, because you got
You can do it again.
scooters with electric motors that are going past my house at 30 miles an hour.
Right. So we
Yeah.
start in the elementary schools and do make a concerted effort to expand on what UDOT's already doing in a lot of schools to help children understand safe walking to school. They have a whole series of videos that are really, really cool, based kind of in a game environment that help kids learn how to navigate streets, walking. We put that in there, that we need to partner with organizations or develop our own programs to further bike
okay, I missed
safety
that.
and education, and likewise on the car side, because as I ride my bike, I notice cars
Yeah, exactly.
doing things that make me very uncomfortable, if not illegal, but often uncomfortable. And so we all need to be educated, and we need to get the infrastructure better so that those conflicts and those uncertainties are reduced.
I think
Which
that's a
part
good
talks
point.
about the education?
I'm saying
About adding.
there's
These-
not that.
Oh, there's not. Oh.
Yeah, we can add guidelines on how to implement and ensure that we're working with each facility. We're not going out and unilaterally making specific facility decisions and changing people's on-street parking without, consulting. Those are all things that we can add into this Chapter 5 policy and program recommendations. And I'm happy to spend some time drafting and bring that back to you for your consideration, or to take that as a recommendation to council and move ahead to council. Really, I'm happy to entertain whatever motion at the conclusion of the discussion today to advance that. And
We've kind of cut you off, I apologize.
oh no, this isn't a monologue.
We're only on, page 3 of 27 or something?
No, we're farther along than
Can
that.
I ask one quick question, Chair? Is that okay?
Let's do a question and then question, because I know you both have something you'd like to bring up.
Go ahead.
I know you've got models and studies. I don't know how to read all those things. I haven't seen those. If you were to get a gut check on it, how many residents do we have in Springville right now? Do you know?
Like 30,
Anyone?
We have about 36,000.
36,000.
Residents.
So how many people of the 36,000 do you think know that there is a transportation plan being considered? I mean, if you had to guess. 'cause
1,000.
you've- what's that?
1,000.
1,000? So 1/30th of the population is aware of what we're being asked to approve tonight.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we find a better way. I don't know how to do it.
I don't either, because I'm going to tell you it's the same number for the transportation plan, for the street transportation plan. It's the same number for the general plan.
Sure, but these
And
have
we
a lot-
wanna do
these have
better.
a bigger impact on neighborhoods and streets than in a lot of cases that I think than some of those other things have to do with. Those are about development, right? This is about modifying existing
The
neighborhoods.
transportation plan is too.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just my suggestion.
Yeah.
We've got 1/30th of the population that even knows that it's there.
Yeah.
I would say that's consistent with most everything that we talk about. That as much as we try to engage, it's really, really hard. But the more we talk about it, we each have a network. We each have neighbors. We represent different neighborhoods of the city, and the more we talk about stuff, the more we increase that awareness.
We really struggle with that. And, yeah, I mean, if
I
you-
think every organization does. Having been in the school system, it's a problem, and people are apathetic to most things until it
until it
affects them,
threatens.
right?
Yeah, until there's a
yeah.
fear of
So
loss.
it's hard, and I think you just have to keep trying to communicate and putting it in the newsletters and doing what you can. But I think it's difficult, and I think it exists in most organizations.
And I'm so happy to have a cross-section of the community here so that we can get this kind of feedback for Ralph to tell us, hey, I had no idea this was happening.
And you know why.
Right.
I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on
Not getting
any
the
of
city
those things.
newsletter.
I get 140 emails a day. So.
And the Herald's
and I pay my
closed,
bill
so.
online.
Yeah.
But I didn't see a billboard up on Main Street or anything that says, hey, Ralph, pay attention because we need your input.
Right.
It kind of feels sometimes like, okay, hey, Ralph, here's what you got, and I don't want to have that happen.
No.
And I know you don't either. You would love to have all of the people, and I don't want to, slight anybody that has spent so many hours. I can only imagine how many,
Well, that's the
hours
comment
you
that
have
I
spent.
wanted to make, and I'm a biker who bikes about every day, and I'm on your left all the time. But really, we're in very much support, and all the work that's gone into this, I know the hours of sitting in meetings and so forth to do this is amazing, and we're all in it for the same reason. We just want, we want opportunities for all people and all interests. We just want to do it in a safe manner. So,
Absolutely.
anyway, thank you, all you people that were involved.
Yes, agreed. Hey, Josh, just real quick, and this is it's just a suggestion. I deleted all my social media too about a year ago. So, but I was just gonna say, I remember there was like several Springville community groups. And we posted in there because it always seemed like there was a mob of people,
Yeah.
but that's all
And
posted
It
in
was
there.
posted
So-
multiple times in each of
Yeah.
those groups,
So-
and 3 times for just this meeting or probably twice for this meeting on our Monday update, and then individual posts. So yeah, I
I
struggle
also
with.
think people don't understand what this really
Really?
means.
No.
Transportation.
It's just like when we post adopting the traditional neighborhood development overlay, people are gonna be like, well, what's that? But when they come see the Westfield Central Plan, they say, well, I didn't know it was that. So being clear and,
But in those smaller ones, just like these roads, just.
yes, it's a different
Before you use
scale.
that as an excuse.
Yeah.
On the roads and that smaller community, we could have.
Absolutely.
Gone the extra mile. for those
Absolutely.
people.
is this on the website?
This
City
draft
website.
plan,
Yeah.
yes,
There should be a link to it.
I'm sure there is, and if there's not,
There's a flyer on there that they log into the city website and it says, hey, go check out the new master plan, or is it?
we don't have a card on the front page. That's what we call those little squares on the front page that says this, but we should put a card
That
up
might
there.
be a suggestion.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that might be something that, as opposed to a link on the page and then say, well, if you'd have clicked it, you'd have known.
Right.
So,
Does this
With
city
maybe
have-
add an executive summary to the beginning of it that just tells the lay reader, this is what we're gonna be talking about in this report before they dive deeper. Sorry, I
No,
interrupted
no,
you.
no. No, you're fine. Oh, I was gonna ask if the city had like a booth at the farmer's market that they,
We did.
like, and do they talk about these things in at that?
Well, we
booth
don't have
or
a-
anything?
We don't have a standing booth. We did do a booth for this plan, and for reframing downtown,
Reframing downtown,
we
I
did.
remember seeing
We took this
something.
whole area with our giant circus tent, and
Sweet.
And I think that's,
Handed out
you know,
flyers like it was
if,
crazy.
if people aren't on Facebook, but they
Yeah.
participate in the community. they
yeah,
would
the
see
pop-up
it there.
events is what we call them, where we can
might want to
piggyback.
maybe incorporate some marketing in there too. I mean, because again, active transportation, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
There's a way that we could communicate to people that, hey, beep, 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 see, this is gonna impact you, come in and see how.
Right. And I don't even love the name of the plan. Some other cities have done, like, there's one like Taylorsville in Motion or something. It's like, or things that are sound less bureaucratic. Springville Active
But
Transportation.
it is great.
Yeah,
Plan's
it's
great.
only one
But
word
active
different than the transportation plan, which is,
I didn't understand the active transportation plan, man. I thought it was like, we're working hard to make sure you can get down Main Street faster, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Not
what I
this
kinda
plan.
thought it was, but I didn't realize it was like, the active part of it is, hey, riding bikes, this and this and this, this is what this plan is.
Yeah.
Is basically, human-powered, whatever.
Non-vehicular.
plan. Yeah, yeah.
We've got a whole nother couple 100-page
As long as
plan
we're
for
not
the-
perceived as trying to slide something under, I think we'll be successful. I think when you will have big problems is if people feel like, oh my gosh, you were kind of tricky, and now I can't park on my street.
Absolutely.
'Cause- Yeah, okay.
Okay. Keep that in mind as we move forward and you come to a motion, how you'd like, prefer me to address those concerns as we incorporate them into the plan. On the recommended network, we have like we've mentioned, a couple different types of improvements. We have the corridor improvements, which are the lines, the place-to-place, point-to-point, and this is that recommended network. Hopefully you've all seen it in the PDF where you can zoom in and get a close look at it. What this really does is it provides a well-connected, comfortable network that is really suitable for all ages and abilities. And provides connectivity on all of those goals that we stated at the beginning of the plan, and were prioritized by the top 50 projects based on those prioritization categories that we discussed also. So this is the corridors, and then this is the recommended spot improvements. So all the you can see we've got enhanced intersections, mid-block crossings, grade-separated crossings, railroad crossing, trail access, 5 categories of spot improvements. And then this is really key, and this applies to all the things we talked about. It says this note here, specific treatment to be determined based on engineering analysis. So when we come in to do a spot improvement or we come in to do a bicycle boulevard, we will dig in deep on each one of those to determine what is the best thing to do here. This just identifies that, hey, the intersection of Center Street and Main Street is a problem. Go figure out something. Or the railroad crossing at 4th West and Center Street is a problem. Go figure that out. But
so that's why it's not like listed, this, and this, because it's to be determined.
right, I mean, it does called out enhanced intersection because we know it's an intersection and it needs to be worked
Yeah.
on, and we know what kind of improvements they are, but we don't know what the specific
One for that
solution
road.
is for each one. Exactly. I see people staring closely into this. Should I stick around for a little bit? Do we have any specific?
I just was looking at that Crandall Boulevard where it meets, I don't know if you know where Crandall Boulevard is, but it's where it meets the street that goes in front of the junior high.
Oh, yes,
That
yes.
gets pretty hairy. They've had police officers up there a lot that have, been tagging people because they were on that stop sign. So I was surprised, I was just surprised that's not a enhanced intersection.
It's probably because the overlap of what network was or what facility was proposed there. But it's also, again, if we go in and do a corridor and say, hey, this intersection is problematic, we need to do something here, we'll do it. This doesn't tell us every specific spot improvement that needs to be done along a corridor, but just kind of the top tier elements. But we know that there's a number of hot spots around the junior high that are problematic. And we actually, interestingly, had the high school 2 years ago when we brought all the schools in. We had the middle school, the junior high, the high school, and did we have any elementaries? But we did have we had definitely the principals from Spring Canyon, Springville Junior, and Springville High there to talk to us about their specific concerns about active transportation around their facilities, and those comments were incorporated into the plan. So implementation, this is the next one where you're all going to maybe catch your breath. There's a lot of different places funding can come from, and our strategy for this plan is to generally not saddle the general fund of the city with the cost of most of the capital improvements that we're proposing. We're not going to go and try to get a ton of money to go build some of these expensive facilities, but we are pushing to start having a consistent and predictable amount of funding for maintenance. The biggest concern from our Public Works division, especially our Streets division, is, hey, when you put down more striping, you put down a protected bike lane that now has a curb in between it and the street, how are we going to plow the bike lane? We need to buy a little Kubota to do that. We're going to have more people to maintain the striping and the signage and plow and sweep, all those type of things. And so we really want to focus on finding the space in the budget to allow our divisions to respond to the increased level of service which this plan represents, so that we can not further extend already extended staff and equipment and resources to take care of more stuff. So that's what we really want to focus on with the local funding. MAG is maybe you could backronym MAG into, instead of Mountain Land Association of Government, like the Magical Advocacy Group. I'm still not sure how they got Murdoch Canal Trail done, and how they got a bridge in Lehigh to connect it to Draper, and how they've been able to pull together tens of millions of dollars over the past decade to do projects. But they do have a wizard there. I think he literally is a wizard. He's like 6'6" and has a gray beard and is amazing. That runs kind of their active transportation trails planning, and they've been able to do amazing things across the county when the plans have been in place to secure the funding and do the work. There's a ton of funding coming from the state now. I should have looked up these exact numbers because the numbers always elude me. Governor Cox in this year's budget included a one-time allocation of like $40 million for trails and an ongoing allocation of like another 40. So this year we've got like 80 to 90 million, and then ongoing major funding source for regionally significant trails. So if you go back to the map, getting from Spanish Fork to Provo, and getting Dry Creek from 51 all the way out across the freeway to the Utah Lake Perimeter Trail, those kind of things that have major barriers, or even the Hubble Creek Trail connecting the canyon and the Mapleton Lateral Trail out to the freeway and beyond to the future Lakeside or Lakeview corridor. Those kind of things are eligible for this major state funding, and we're really excited about the potential there. The state actually last year on the Main Street program said, you need to apply for money to build the bike lane on Main Street. We said, okay, we will, but let us like do the planning first. We don't want to just jump to conclusions, but they're very excited to start throwing money at capital projects. And there's other elements from the state. They've created there's a fund called the Transportation Improvement Program, which is basically all the funds that kind of go to maintain and improve and build infrastructure. There's now an A-tip and a T-tip, so active transportation improvement and transit transportation. So there are all the time more dedicated sources of funds to address these projects as their value becomes more and more apparent. Then on the federal side, a lot of that money does flow through MAG, but there are a lot of other federal grants and federal appropriations, especially in the most recent Surface Transportation Authorization Bill, that provide opportunities for communities to eliminate barriers, to promote connectivity, and to address climate resiliency through providing and improving these type of facilities. And then there's private funding, which is basically everything that is the obligation of a development to build, ranging from the Allens block or a downtown redevelopment block to put in the separated bike lane on that block of Main Street or do the upgrades, or out in Lakeside where we'll have miles and miles of these type of facilities entirely installed by the developer. So once we get this plan in place, then we stop missing out on the opportunity to have people build it for us.
So the one that we talked about earlier on the agenda doesn't fall under this plan, right? The Lakeside, with the road plan that we talked about earlier, for the Lakeside Landing Road dedication, none of those are based off of anything according to this?
No, they absolutely are.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great, okay, so you
We actually paid MAG, again, magical, came up with some money to have ALTA extend their scope and specifically analyze the Lakeside Landing Plan before it was adopted to recommend what the active transportation network needed to be there.
It'll be built out that way, like you're
No,
saying
I
earlier.
think that's great.
So that plat, all of the radiuses and everything, all the geometry on that plat reflect that we're going to have roundabouts and that they're going to have protected intersections, and that some of the intersections are going to have fancy bike-sounding intersections like toucans and hawks, and that's all coming in from the ground up on that plan.
Do they have any data showing us what the maintenance costs would be? So let's say I spend $1 to implement this. What's the long-term liability? And maybe you'll get to that.
Yeah, the best data that we have locally is, I just put it in.
There's quite a bit in the appendix, by the way, if you never made it that far.
Here we go. No. There is data in here that came from a study a couple of years ago.
And if you know what it is off the top of your head.
Yeah, I don't. I
Is
can
it
never
like-
remember
is
the
it like
numbers.
one for one, you think, or you don't?
Oh,
know?
no, not. Totally depends on what it is. But no, it's not one for one. Some of these facilities are very expensive from a capital standpoint and very easy to maintain. I can't find it flipping through this.
You looking for the cost estimate?
Yeah,
That's on page 72.
the maintenance cost estimates.
Oh, no, these are just
Oh,
the,
that's the cost
thi-
estimates.
this, yeah.
I'm just saying, since we're asking the citizens here we're gonna put in this bike path, but you're gonna be responsible to maintain it, we probably ought to have some kind of information to say.
No, they're not going to be responsible to maintain it.
Oh, I thought that's what you're saying with the local funding is,
No, the city government is going to be responsible for maintaining it.
right, which is the citizens of, the taxes, right?
Correct. Yes.
So citizens are paying for the maintenance.
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm not trying to be flippant.
No. That's
Just trying to understand, so
That's
if
a
it's
small
like,
misunderstanding that somebody was gonna be out there in the.
no, I
He's
know I'm
thinking
not shoveling the walk in
New
front of
taxes,
my house.
right? is what
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah,
Digging
New taxes.
taxes.
well,
we're
sure,
gonna have
because
digging
someone
shovels.
thinks,
That's
okay,
what
you're
that
putting in,
I thought so too.
I mean, we've all seen where the islands and the, down State Street have come, gone.
Yeah.
And, just because of maintenance issues and costs. So that might be something that's part of our plan to, like, for PRs, to say, hey, look, this will be great, and we have a plan to maintain it, and I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just sorry, I can't.
It's okay,
Can't
I just,
flip to
I
it.
just.
Oh,
I
here we
guess
go.
my comment- okay.
One could ask the question, though, when you say local maintenance, is that new taxes? Will there be new taxes for maintenance?
Well, when's the last time we raised taxes in Springville?
Yeah.
Transportation tax.
There's,
I mean,
Or
there is
the-
no
the-
transportation
the
tax, but
but
the
there,
Supreme
but the
Court,
question's gonna be asked.
yeah, the
And
Supreme
that's
Court
what I
did
think
figure
Ralph's
out that,
comment's a good one.
did tell us that we could levy a transportation utility fund
Uh-huh.
until maybe the legislature tells us we can't this year, so we're biding our time. But there may be new revenue sources. Most likely it would come from just growth in the general fund.
Increased power costs.
And
Transfers.
the PAR that we passed.
The PAR tax, yes, the PAR taxes, we went to the PAR board first with this, Ralph sat in on a little bit of that last meeting. So on page 75, we have this per mile annual maintenance cost estimate ranges, and that came from the Salt Lake Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan from 2015. I talked to the transportation director at Salt Lake City, Jonathan Larson, and he says they're still really struggling with quantifying this. And his recommendation was that instead of looking at it at a per mile cost, look at it more chunky in terms of how much do you do before you need another crew, and look at it in terms of crews, because we kind of know how much work a crew can do, a streets crew, and how many we have, and we know how much it costs to buy the truck and the equipment and the 3 guys to make a crew. But right here, like a protected bike lane might be $1,200 to $25,000 a mile per year with an assumed average of
To maintain it,
2,000.
is that maintenance?
Yes, for a 2,000. So if you look over on the right, our total maintenance cost at build out based on the assumed average here comes out to about $361,000, and then we can inflate that and make it $500,000 and inflate it again. But it does give us a kind of a ballpark as to.
So tell me, the first column says low, means what? That's the
means-
cost to build, right?
No, that's the lowest per mile maintenance based on the analysis they did to come up with this table.
The highest is 85, assumed average is 5,000.
Right.
So the
Pretty-
cost to build out is,
I mean, we can go to that, but this whole plan is like $35 million.
no, I'm just asking what the fourth column means then.
Oh,
The 141,005. I want
That's-
this to be successful,
Yeah.
and I think that these comments are gonna help us to be successful, right?
That last column is average times how many miles we have in the planet build out. So if you go back to that table we spent so much time on, that fourth column is assumed average times 2.8, 17.2, 28.3, et cetera.
I don't understand, but that's
Oh,
okay.
so the assumed average times how many miles of that facility, as you see on your screen, that we have. So if a buffered bike lane is $7,000, we have 17.2 miles of bike lane, so that's 120,000 of a buffered bike lane. That's $120,000 of annualized maintenance cost.
Right, so if I look at a protected bike lane, the low estimate is $1,200 to cost, right?
Correct.
25,000 is the high cost.
Correct.
But then we've done an assumed average of 2,000, which is barely above the low cost.
Right.
And then the cost at build out of 16,000 means that's what you think it's gonna cost based on the maps that we have?
That means we've got
So
8
times
miles
8
of separated bikeways, so 2,000 times 8 is 16,000.
Okay,
Yep. It's just multiplying it out by how much of that facility the plan recommends. But we're very eyes open on that part of it. And that's a lot of the discussion we've been having for the last, for the last, I don't know, since March of '22 when we got the
we gotta give
first
us
final
bar
draft.
stool up there.
No, I need the exercise. Your metabolism,
You're
You'd rather sit on the bike or something right there, right?
Not for that long.
For that long?
No.
Not that comfortable a seat.
It's not, yeah, it's not quite a Dutch bike with upright. It's not as upright as I need to be.
Well, thanks for your help to
Oh, you're
understand
welcome.
some of these things, so.
Like I mentioned, we were talking today. This is something we've been like up to our necks in for 3 years, and you just got the copy of it 2 weeks ago. So it's to be expected that we need to spend some time helping everyone, come up to speed. So this is the gut check here. The total implementation cost for the top 50 projects is $35 million. We've broken that out by whose facilities they're on. So $5.7 million of these proposed projects are on UDOT facilities. 565,000 of them are on facilities that MAG is participating in construction and funding of, like 1200 West. Almost 10 million of it would be the responsibility of new development, because they're streets and facilities that would come with new development. And then almost $20 million of it is on Springville facilities. Now this doesn't say where the funding's going to come from, just what is the value of projects that are within the purview of each of these groups. So the total maximum cost that the city's got to come up with somehow, and primarily through federal, state, and regional capital funding sources, is about $20 million, which is a big chunk of change, which is two of these buildings.
Since we're voting to approve this tonight, what will be the source of that income?
We won't do a project until we have the money to do it.
I mean, are they looking at doing a bond or anything?
No. We're, as I mentioned, we're not looking primarily for the city to cover the capital costs, any of these major capital costs. When they're small things like restriping a bike lane, those are things we can work into, and we've actually have a whole table that compares all of these recommendations with our 5-year capital plans and says how many of them can just be picked up as part of those
This will be
plans.
over a long period of time. Yeah.
This will be over decades, and we will go
Is there a timeline
primarily.
in here as well?
The what?
Is there a timeline in here?
There is not a timeline in here, no. There is a set of catalytic or kickoff projects that we want to accomplish first, but the projects are not,
Understood. Things change.
time horizon.
Out of that 20 million, what do you think we'll spend in the next 10 years? I mean, it's gonna escalate, but
Yeah.
everything's gonna take
Yeah.
more. I don't know how that goes.
There are breakdowns on like money that could come from MAG or the state
But
and federal.
that's
in
what
here.
he's got that up there, but that's,
So
Well, this
those-
isn't where the money
those are-
comes from.
That's not where it comes from. It's
It's where the
who's
obligation
responsible
would be.
for it. So
Like if we're doing something on 4th South, Springville wouldn't be responsible for it because that's a UDOT.
So
one.
$5 million of the projects are on UDOT facilities, so we're never going to face the bill for that. 20 million are on our facilities, so we're gonna foot the bill for that, but the funding to foot that bill is gonna come from federal and state funds.
Outside of what they're responsible for. This is their responsibility. The others will come as grants.
Yeah,
so they're
UDOT's
gonna
gonna,
additionally
Grants and
kick in
stuff like
money
that, yeah.
for that 20 million, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
yes, that 20 million is the capital cost, and that 20 million is gonna come from MAG, state, and the federal funding sources. And that's literally, MAG has spent more money than on bike facilities in the past 10 years. And now that we have tens of millions of dollars more flowing at us, we anticipate to make a lot quicker progress. Quick way to kind of look and see how much we may end up spending in the near horizon is to go to page 118, Appendix G, prioritized projects. And we'll get to these a little later, but roughly the total cost of these prioritized projects is 4.8, 5.2, 5.9, probably $5.9 million in these 4 pilot projects. So I think it's reasonable to assume that we could spend that amount of money in the next 10 years very easily.
So the highest priority you've got here is on Center Street to
Right.
reconfigure Center Street, is what
Correct.
you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Here's the pilot projects.
Mhm.
I want to go through these with you. The number one is Center Street in the downtown, which is basically from 4th East to 4th West. And it's part of what's identified in the plan as the downtown green streets, which is configuring the wide streets, as you're very aware from driving around town. And Genevieve just mentioned, 3rd South is little, 2nd South is not. In 1852, we platted 4 blocks by 4 blocks and made 132-foot wide roads, which is the standard. I always look it up, however many rods and chains that is. Then soon after that, everybody came back and said, you know, those are real big blocks. So they came in and divided them all into quarters, so we went from a 4x4 grid to an 8x8 grid.
Second West, say so big.
It's the same size as Center Street, the same size as 2nd South, and the same size as 2nd North, except 2nd North gets messed
but not
up.
Second East.
2nd East is odd. It is a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we're
It's
not,
like,
it's because of the railroad, probably,
It did go down.
because you couldn't really
at some
get
point.
the 4th.
oh yeah, and the outside roads of the Platte are, we didn't get the whole roads, 170 years ago. So that's why 4th North, 4th South, and 4th East, 4th West are weird, because they were never fully platted. So on Center Street, we want to evaluate whether we do a shared use path, a side path, to provide a protected, separated facility on Center Street for those 8 blocks. And also, as part of that, consider large center medians programmed as linear park, or alternatively narrowing the street to have wider pedestrian zones on the sides that could perform a lot of functions. But we've had a lot of fun kind of thinking through what, with a 132-foot wide street, what you could put in the middle of the street to really make Plot A a fun place to be. Can you imagine playing pickleball in the middle of the street? Maybe not, but there's a lot of room in there to play with, and that's really the crux of this first plan, or this first project. And the second listed, and they're not really, they're prioritized generally how they came out of the overall project list. Hobble Creek, this one is, as you look at the second to last column, there's a column for feasibility. The Center Street is high, Hobble Creek is low, because generally we don't own any of it. We have a great project from 100 West to 400 West and then out to the freeway that's being done in cooperation with FEMA to address our floodplain issues. That the preliminary engineering on that's showing us that they're going to have room after they play with the river to build a path along the side of the river all the way from essentially 950 West and beyond, or 1200, 1750, 1600 West, all the way along the river, going under the rail in 4th West from Devon Glen. So you go shoot right under there with the creek, and then follow an at-grade trail along the river to 100 West, just by Snelson's photo. And then if we can get 1 block to Main Street, we've got half a Plat A. So that's kind of miraculous, and is something we would be a forever project. But the reason we put this in here is that we want to start building the institutional inertia now and the institutional knowledge. This is something that's important to us and that we need to start working on. Just like Murdoch Canal Trail didn't happen in a year, this is a multi-decade project. But as properties turn over, we need to go get right-of-way off of those properties. We need to, buy them, get the property we need, perhaps change the entitlements to make that economically feasible for us. We need to do everything we can at every opportunity so that in a couple decades we have a viable trail. There may be some places we never get through, like we may never get from Bartholomew to Hobble Creek Park. That and we may never get from the Dip Road to 8th South, but this also has tells us to use adjacent streets as interim connections, and to do like we've done on Canyon, to do street trails and other things, but as much as we can, start working towards that ultimate goal of having a Harbor Creek that's actually accessible to the citizens of Springville.
Is that the plan, or to use adjacent streets for like Plat A, since the yards are so small?
Right. For now, the long-range plan is to go and identify every single property that we would need to impact and what the boundaries of that would be and how we would configure it. And then as opportunity arises, to go and secure that right-of-way piece by piece by piece for those blocks.
The 100 South one-way section, that's part of Hobble Creek.
Yes, that's part of the, so we've got one block down. At least we've closed the street to vehicular traffic, but you can go ride your bike up and down there and be perfectly safe. Just don't go over the guardrail into the river.
Can I ask you a quick question? So you're saying on Center Street, it says shared use path or side path.
Mhm.
So that, I'm looking at the vision you have here, it's like a path way up Center Street? Is that what are you looking at?
Right, it's like a separated path on the side of Center Street.
So it wouldn't look necessarily like this, just I'm just curious how that looks,
Think
just to understand,
think
because that's
South
what people are gonna ask.
State Street in
right?
Provo.
What's that?
Think State Street in Provo from 1860 south to 8th South. That section that UDOT rebuilt, well, I don't know how long it's been in the teens somewhere, and then along 300 south from 7th East to University. There's like a 10-foot side path all along the east side of State Street there with basically two lanes, and they have little stop signs. So that's a side path.
Okay.
Or what BYU has put in along 9th East, on the west side of 9th East, adjacent to all the redevelopment they've done from the MTC all the way down to the new music building. They've done a side path there as well.
Certainly would be a lot safer than what's there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What's that half-mile section that's separate from the 1.86 mile section?
That is Center Street from, I'd have to go look at the mapping data. This is tricky because each section, between each intersection, is a separate line in the GIS, and so getting them to all total up right is tricky, but the second center one is,
That's why there's different,
That could be
Entries
from
for the
railroad
same
tracks
kind
to.
of thing.
it's basically railroad tracks to Merritt.
Yeah.
That Center Street is one of our best streets in terms of connecting civic destinations. It brings you to the Civic Center, to the library, to the post office, to Merritt, Reagan, West Side, Art City, and eventually to the junior high. It was one of the areas where we see the most traffic when we did the analysis. So we get a lot of bang for our buck by providing a really great facility there and letting people from both sides of the city access our civic amenities downtown.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of plays into the rails to trails just a little bit, doesn't it? That particular section of connection.
Not necessarily. The rails to trails is more from 8th South to 1600 South along the Tintic. That's really the one rails to trails area we have, but we're still investigating, and you may be referring to how we get from the north side of the Tintic on the south side of 4th up to Center Street.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a line on the map that encourages us to figure out if we can follow the railroad under the 4th South Viaduct and then get all the way up to Center Street, because then my daughter would be golden getting to Spring Canyon, because she could just go down 4th West and then follow that rail trail down to 7th South and be at school.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a major improvement to the barrier that 4th South is right now.
Yeah.
Then the last is 7th South, which is proposed to be a high comfort bike boulevard with aggressive traffic calming measures that would run all the way from the proposed front runner station at 1600 West, west of Smith's, on the rail in the farm at the 4 South overpass, all the way up and through Main Street. Our reframing downtown plan proposes a roundabout at the main, replacing the 8951 interchange with a roundabout, and that those bridges predate I-15 by a good while, so they're candidates for replacement. And we could really do a less expensive project with a roundabout, but one of the key elements of that roundabout would be reconnecting 7th, where we've closed it when Fox Ridge went in, so that you have to come through Fox Ridge up to that 600 South, or they're going to put the light. We'll reconnect 7th South there, so you can come all the way across through the roundabout and then continue up east. So there's a really viable alternative other than 4th to get across the city. And that is planned to also be a bikeway that provides really good active transit connections from the front runner station past the CRC, Meadowbrook, Spring Canyon, all the commercial shopping areas there, Zeppies, where my kids always want to go, all the way up east. So those are accessible, and we overcome those real major barriers, because anyone who's trying to get across 7th South or get across Main Street at 7th South on a bike is either Logan or
I've done it on foot, and it's pretty dicey.
because you got to go across the slip lane that's going to 89 and then stand in the middle, and
But he can do a wheelie over the Jersey barrier like nothing.
so that's really what that 7th South facility is. Yeah, I don't think the Madsen goes over the Jersey barriers. Our plan for the adoption process, we took this to the PAR board on July 25th, and they recommended, as a board that provides recommendations and advice to the council, they made a recommendation to the council to approve on July 25th. We have currently scheduled and underway our planning commission meeting right now. The plan has us going to present to a city council work session, which is we probably may end up taking the whole time in the work session and going over the plan with an adoption scheduled for September 19th. And that's obviously subject to change based on your motion today and how you'd like to carry forward addressing the really great recommendations that you've made to flesh out the plan. But that is really where we are in terms of adoption, and we're excited to move this forward. And we have a recommended motion to start with, but happy to help you craft a motion to accomplish what you'd like to accomplish in terms of moving the plan forward.
Okay. And of course, we need to have a public hearing before we discuss motions. But before we do that, thank you for that presentation.
Welcome.
And
Absolutely. Thank you.
really detailed and lots of questions from us, so thank you for that.
I did tell Ann and Ralph when they were in my office early to bring caffeine.
You warned us.
It's good advice.
I wish I had that advice. I had to rely on mystery candy from the drawer.
It's a little sketchy.
It helps.
Okay. Well, then let's move to the public hearing. We need a motion to open a public hearing. Would
So
someone
moved.
like to? We have a motion. And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, at this point, the public hearing is open. We have one comment that was emailed in. We're not real sure on the procedure for that, whether you'd like us to read it in or just make it available. Okay. Before we decide, just to check, is Carol Long here? No. Okay. Then unless someone on the commission feels differently, I think what I'll do is I will summarize what's here and then pass it down and then place it up here so anybody who's in the audience would like to read it, it's available to you, and we'll also put it in the minutes as public comment. So more or less it says Mrs. Long likes to visit Springville on her bike with her son, and she encourages us to adopt the active transportation plan. She enjoys being here and participating in the amenities that we have here, and she has experienced the changes in Provo with the active transportation plan that they have put in place there, and the bike infrastructure that has been built more recently, and has found that through the changes that happened in Provo, she has gained more confidence, and she's been biking more even in the winter. And she has witnessed other families also increase their usage of those systems and of cycling in town. She feels that the infrastructure is safe and that it is inviting, or if infrastructure is safe and inviting, it will be utilized. She sums up with, change doesn't have to happen all at once to make a big difference, and it doesn't have to be done alone. If every surrounding city adopts an active transportation plan, it can become even more robust. With the synergy of the effort among the communities, we can help each other learn together to help build stronger and happier towns. So that's the summary of it, and I will pass it down so you can read the entire comment. It's a great letter. So if she was here, we tell her thank you for submitting that. It's helpful to have comment. Whether it's here in the meeting or provided in this manner, it's still helpful. So I would like to invite anybody who would like to address the commission to please do so. As you do so, you need to come to the microphone, state your name and your address for the record, and feel free.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I do have a question. So there was a woman who was here earlier. She had to leave for family reasons. She sent me a text of the comment she wanted to make. Am I okay to read that into the record?
Do you have her name?
Yes, her name is
Okay.
Emily Lundberg Bastian, and I can get the her address later. I don't have it with me right now, but
I have no objection.
Not me neither.
Sounds like we're good. Please
Okay.
do.
So Emily says, thanks for letting me and my distracting young boys sit in for a few minutes to hear the active transportation plan discussion. I wish I could have stayed to make this comment in person. Our family moved back to Springville 2 years ago, but I grew up in Mapleton and went to Springville High School as a Mighty Red Devil. Living away in Spanish Fork as a parent, I wanted to get an e-bike to take my kids around for errands, but where we lived, it was impossible to get anywhere safely. I was so excited to move back to Springville because there was some access for me to get to Reams, the library, parks, and other shops. Only after moving here did it finally make sense for us to invest in an e-bike. Being on a bike, you feel the change in the temperature of the air. You smell the fresh rain on the grass. You see the creek, the yellow house, the kids playing in the field. I often find myself distracted in my day-to-day life of mothering, but when I get on that bike with my kids, I'm present to hear their stories, sing with them, and feel their movement as they giggle and shift in the back seat. In those moments, I am connected to them and to the earth. I am present. This plan will remove barriers and increase access for my family and other families to get to more places and go farther distances, connecting with our community along the way. I'm excited to see this plan continue to the finish line and urge you to pass it with a favorable recommendation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'd like to make a comment of my own. As was mentioned, I served on the ad hoc committee that helped draft this plan.
Did you state?
Oh, my name is Logan Millsap, sorry, and I live at 133 South, 880 East here in Springville.
Thank you.
Yes, and we worked very, very hard to draft this plan. It's interesting to hear you guys' comments about how like, oh, well, we didn't know because we tried very hard to get the word out as hard as we could. We went to the farmer's market, we talked to people there, we put up flyers. I spent my own money to print flyers and posters and put them up around town. We made posts in local neighborhood Facebook groups. We worked really hard to get the links out for the surveys. We put it on it was on the main page of the city website for a while. It was in the city newsletter. I think it was in one of Mayor's monthly addresses or whatever, the little blurb he writes. So we worked very hard. Obviously, we can't reach everybody, but I do feel like we were able to get our finger on the pulse of the residents here in Springville. And what I felt that was saying was people were very, very much in support of safer places to ride, infrastructure that works well with them walking and biking, getting their kids to school, etc. And I know that it's good news that we don't have to kind of reinvent the bicycle wheel for this. There's a lot of cities where plans like this have been put in place. You can look to bicycling utopias like Copenhagen and the Netherlands, but you don't have to go that far afield. There's a lot of places here in Utah and in the United States where people have demonstrated that this infrastructure is not only feasible to build and affordable to build, but also we see a good return, and we'll see a lot of people take up biking, and it will help with congestion, help with making our community feel more tight-knit and supporting our local businesses. So I'm very glad to hear the discussion you guys had tonight. Oh, I also wanted to make a comment. You guys talked about education. I know in Spanish Fork, where they've been building quite a lot of trails in the last few years, you've probably experienced their wonderful river trail and some of the pieces through the city. One of the men that was here, Jeremy Chandler, he wanted to make a comment in favor of the plan. He teaches at a middle school there in Spanish Fork, and they actually have, it's part of their curriculum. The kids learn about, rules of the road and how to ride, how to signal. So I think that we kind of see that kind of stuff happen here in Springville at our local schools with a plan like this. So I'm glad you guys got that added as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. And by the way, Logan, no one would ever question the effort you guys have put in. It's
Yeah.
been amazing.
Right.
In terms of communication, that's just, it's par for the course. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, thank you, Council, Commission, for having me. My name's Hunter Huffman. I live at 154 C Street in Brookside. My background is in architecture and planning, and I've met with Josh at least once on a few things. I think I'm in favor of the active transportation plan. I just wanted to voice support there. I think these are actually great steps for creating a vibrant and walkable community. Specifically, the way that Main Street here is being addressed, I think it is a very effective plan that way, making it a family-friendly environment. One of the things that I was going to say was, in conjunction with the Historic Overlay District and the Main Street, revitalizing Main Street plan, I think I would encourage the commission that as future development plans come into Main Street and downtown, that as the active transportation plan is taking into account bicyclists and pedestrians, building design and height and number of stories and those types of things also play an incredible role in terms of creating that vibrant community center. So nothing specific, but just as those plans come to fruition, I know there's things in pre-app and those types of processes for the Allen's Block and others, but thank you.
You're saying it would improve it?
Yes.
Yeah, more people improve the active transportation efforts, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a long walk.
But it's a friendly one.
Yes.
So
My name's
we're
Denise Gale. I live at 1300 East Center Street, and I'm not as comfortable in the setting as some of you guys, but I also don't feel well, so pardon me. But I didn't want to miss tonight because I kind of want to give a little bit of, I haven't been involved in this study. I'm not super familiar with all the things on the map, but as just kind of a regular citizen, as I listen to some of your objections, some of my thoughts are, excuse me. I grew up in a place where my home was profoundly affected as a child when the Bangor Highway was built. I've lived in Brookside for a long time. I've lived on Center Street for a long time. So I really understand what you guys are saying with some of your, how does this affect the citizens who are already here? You mentioned that as well. But Springville is changing. Springville's changing. And so when we adopt something that shows that we are ready to change in a way that doesn't respond to the same old traffic patterns, I think that's a really forward-thinking thing to do. I also think a lot about my kids' safety. I have kids who have been hit on their bikes 2 or 3 different times. So yes, safety is a concern, but also when we think about education, we can't educate from kind of under a rock, so to speak. We have to like widen our horizons a little bit. We can't continue to live in a completely car-centric environment and think that this bicycle awareness is going to take place. So what we have to do is grow into this space where we are all like looking at a broader mindset a little bit. And you know, I grew up in a car-centric world. I'm not the youngest person in this room, and I'm embarrassed to say that from my home on Center Street, I drive to my office, which is on Main Street, and I drive to my other office, which is in Mapleton. And that's a little bit embarrassing to me because I probably should be as cool as Logan, but I am not. But until we kind of broaden the way we're building our city, how can we expect people to broaden the way that we're using our city? So that's just some of my thoughts on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Or are you all comfortable where you're at?
Seeing no one else coming forward, I move to close the public hearing.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I guess before we move into a robust discussion, if you'd like to, I'd just like to get a feel for the direction that you'd like to go in. Whether you'd like to ask Josh to put these suggestions that we've made into the plan and then bring them back, or whether you'd just like to vote yay or nay on this tonight and have it go to city council with those
Recommendations.
put in. Mhm.
I think you actually did a good job, Karen, outlining the 3 issues. And I think if we could add that tonight, I say we get this over and out, you know what I mean? Unless there are some serious objections to getting it done, but
Because if
say
we
if-
took it back, we'd have to, continue?
Yeah, we'd have to continue.
Yeah.
I'd rather not do
I'll
that.
Okay. On this side,
Let's discuss the issues and
I'd agree.
and go ahead with the plan.
I think I also bring kind of a unique perspective because unfortunately, I'm the guy that didn't know anything about it. And if I'm like, you know, I want this to be successful, I think this is a great opportunity for us to move forward with positive change, all those kinds of things. But for us to be successful, we're gonna have to increase our communication somehow with the public. I mean, I'm not complaining. I think you guys done amazing. I've done this same thing before too, you know, where I've tried to reach out to people. So I'm a builder by trade, you know. So I've met with neighbors, I've met with people and then I can't tell you how many times people have said what I just said today is I never knew anything about this. You know, and I'm like, there's signs, there's all this kinds of stuff, right? So I think for us to be successful, we have to find some way to help, you know, get this to move forward in a public environment where they can do, and however we do that, I don't know. You probably have a better way of having that happen, but I think that's where you're gonna be successful in this project. So that when the trucks show up and they repaint the lines, everybody's like going, sweet, now I know what's happening, I know how I feel about it, and I feel good about it. So that's my only concern or question, is to help be the success of this project.
okay. Any feedback from this side?
I made my comments about education. I think we definitely need to make sure that the school districts and everything have education for the kids as to, you know, their bicycle etiquette and their safety and all of those types of things. Some way I'd love to see us, you know, get to, not UDOT, but the driver's license people and have them,
Driver's license.
be educated on how to, how they should drive and the etiquette for their purposes of driving vehicles all the time, but I don't know how to do that, so. But I think education is the key to this whole thing, you know. Educating the people as to what we want to do, what we need to do to make it safe, and I think, you know, that people are going to accept it as they see that it's not going to drastically impact their lives. Quickly, you know, I mean, over the next 50 years, yeah, none of us will be here, probably in 50 years, but our grandkids will, and our children probably will still be here, maybe.
I plan on being here, so just. so you
In 50 years, okay.
know. Yeah.
But the point is this,
Turd or not.
this is,
Dad's 97 and he's still working on it.
this isn't gonna happen overnight. It's a long-term situation, and it should give us plenty of opportunity to alert people as to what the plans are. And I think if we put it in a plan now, and people say, well, we don't like it, then, hey, we can change the transportation plan, just like we changed the master plan at times.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Not carved in stone.
Because I do think we're fast approaching the e-bike situation. I mean, we're coming up on that. You've seen the news, you've seen the golf carts, you've seen, I mean, it's coming fast because they're advertised now at 50 miles an hour for some of those bikes. And, you know, when you can take a 12-year-old, put them on a bike that goes 50 miles an hour, that would have been my dream. But it would have been my neighbor's nightmare, so
Yes.
anyway.
Genevieve, Brett, anything from you two?
I'm on the same page as Commissioner Farr with education and incorporating something so that people riding bikes and also people that aren't riding bikes both are able to learn. I really like the suggestions that Josh had talked about with partnering with groups that are already doing this kind of thing, incorporating it in schools. And I think that's a way that will help bicyclists to know better, like, what they can and can't do, but then also people in vehicles to understand what bikes are doing and that it's okay for them to do this and, you know, that kind of a thing. So there can be better communication on the road.
I'm ready to start working on I think we've discussed the three issues ad nauseum, so I'm ready to move forward, and I think you actually verbalized it fairly well, Karen. We could just put that on paper. We can go ahead. That's where I'm at.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's probably assumed that I am in favor of the plan that I helped develop. I would like to say thank you for the discussion today. Those are some great things that have been brought up tonight as far as considerations that should be added into here that we weren't necessarily considering when the plan was put together. So thank you for making sure those were verbalized. Do we have a motion?
Do we need to write a motion first? With those three things included?
Yes.
Does anyone
Do you have that
some
already written
suggestions how
down?
to accomplish that?
Well, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think what you said was really good,
Thanks.
and just add that
Just
to
add that.
to the existing motion.
Mhm.
It was community engagement, appropriate training, you know, hopefully for both vehicle drivers and bike riders, and what was the third one?
Education.
That was education. What
That
was the third one?
education. Safety, ensuring that the plans are each developed in a way that feels safe to both modes of transportation. Or all modes, I suppose.
So is that what we're making a recommendation for? Or are you gonna redraft anything, or is it
Yeah.
just like
Yeah,
this is?
the recommendation
Redraft.
would be to approve the plan and move it forward to the city council with Josh incorporating the items as discussed before. Can that count as a motion? Recommending, yeah, sorry, recommending
So
approval.
what she just said, could we count that, recommend what she just said? Would that work? And then you can incorporate the three things in.
Before it goes to city council?
I move to recommend approval of the Springville Active Transportation Plan and including additional
Language
Language,
based on the
thank you.
suggestions brought up during our discussion.
language based on the discussion, on the items brought up during the discussion as summarized by Chair Allenson.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimously approved. Or approval is recommended, since we don't. Yes.
The motion's
Uh-huh. We've unanimously approved the recommendation to approve. Okay. We have one additional item on the public hearing agenda tonight. However, there is a request to continue this motion, or this item, but we'll still have a public hearing because we have to have a public hearing on the item, correct? Sure. Okay. The item is LGI Homes requests amendment of the southeastern part regulating plan of the Lakeside Landing Special District Overlay Zone. Would you like to make any comment before we just open the public hearing?
You know what this even means?
Yeah. Nope.
yes,
Yeah, I would like to know.
yes.
So the Lakeside Landing District, that code is based on regulating plans, which are plans that show you where the streets go, where the zones are, and where the parks and open spaces are. LGI wants to pull a street out off of the perimeter of their project because they're not going to do the multifamily that was zoned there. They just want to do all single, so they don't need the frontage, so they're just going to alley load the single family stuff, and that is a change to the regulating plan, and there's a couple other things. And so there's really three regulating plans. There's a north part, the southern part, and then this 15 acres that you recommended we add in, it was like December of 21? Yeah.
A long time ago, yeah.
No, January of 21. Sorry, after we adopted, January of 22. January of 22.
Yeah.
After we adopted this, then we added 15 acres to it. So it became the southeastern part regulating plan. So this is, they're trying to amend the master plan for the 15 acres in the southeastern part of Lakeside. But when they, the consultant that did the plan, Corkett Onerin, who you probably saw through the process, LGI has retained him to help them with their specific development. And when he took the CAD from their engineer and overlaid it on the regulating plan, they were like 60 feet outside of their box over the green street that was next to them, and the property owner, or the person that's working on the property to the west of them, thought the green street was on LGI's property, so these houses ended up like being 20 feet apart when we put the CAD together. So now we've got to kind of go back and figure out who's, where the lines really are and who's actually responsible for building this pedestrian green street, and get everybody, can't think of the word,
On the same page.
working together on rationalized and as to where the lines really are, and that what we're doing actually follows, the things that we're not changing still
That's why
actually
we're
follow the
pushing it
regulating
off
plan.
tonight, is to figure that-
Yeah, so we're pushing that off tonight because we didn't want to, we couldn't perpetuate something that now we knew was in error.
Messed up,
It
yeah.
was messed up, so. On Friday, they got the word, but we figured that out.
Okay.
I move to open a public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The public hearing is now open.
Seeing no one coming to the stand, I move to close the public hearing.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is now closed. Do we have a motion for this item?
I move to continue item 4.
I'll second. I haven't seconded anything for a while. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that item is continued until it is brought back by staff. There's nothing else on our agenda tonight. Do we have any information from staff before we adjourn?
We had one, I believe, one of you sign up for the APA conference. If anyone is, if they're still interested in doing that, we can still sign you up. And you will be getting a save the date here soon for the Planning Commission training that we do together as South County communities. It was in Payson last year and Spanish Fork the year before. And it will be on a Wednesday night, so it'll be an out of typical meeting schedule, but we'll get that to you soon so we can save that date. And other than that, thank you.
Yeah.
What?
Who's hosting?
Santa Quinn is hosting this year. Yeah.
So we're going to the barn? and we get ice
Good question. Maybe we may go to Rolly's Red Barn. We'll see. Maybe we can all go down the slide together.
Okay. Well, thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved, it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Marathon meeting, good meeting.